Okay, this one's for anyone who's ever looked up and felt like something was missing and couldn't explain why. Take a breath, look at the sky in your own way, and come with me. The morning the sky forgot its color, nobody screamed. There were no sirens, no emergency broadcasts, no earthquakes splitting highways in half. The world didn't shake or burn or fall. It just dulled. When the sun came up over the town of Marisfield, it rose behind a sky that was not stormy, not fogged, not clouded. It was a flawless, flat sheet of grey. Not silver, not ash, not anything you could name with certainty. Just absence. A blank that went on forever. It was the kind of sky that made you think the world had been paused. People noticed, of course, on their way to work, walking dogs, checking their phones. They took pictures, said, "Huh, that's weird." Waited for the weather app to explain it. The app didn't know either. By noon, most people had decided it was some kind of atmospheric thing. Pollution, dust, climate, whatever. The news anchors brought on a scientist with kind eyes and careful words. He used phrases like unusual scattering and temporary anomaly and we're still gathering data. Nobody said the sky has forgotten how to be itself. Nobody said something is wrong with memory. Except for one girl sitting on the back steps of a house that needed its paint redone, staring up at the grey and trying to hold on to every shade of blue she could still recall. Her name was Sara. She knew, with the kind of quiet certainty that doesn't need proof, that the sky wasn't the only thing that had changed. Sara hadn't meant to be awake that early. She'd stayed up too late the night before, scrolling through old photos on her phone, chasing a particular memory she couldn't quite locate. It was an image she could see clearly in her head, her father holding her up on his shoulders at the beach when she was small, the horizon tilting, the sky a ridiculous, endless blue. She knew the picture existed, she knew she'd seen it, she couldn't find it anywhere. At some point she fell asleep with her phone face down on her chest and her curtains slightly open. When light brushed her eyelids, she dragged herself up on her elbows and squinted through the gap and frowned. The sky was wrong. Not just overcast. Marisfield had plenty of overcast days. Overcast meant thickness, texture, light pushing through different densities of cloud. This was something else. The color, if you could call it that, was perfectly even from one end of the window frame to the other. No lighter streaks, no darker bruises of impending rain. Just a gentle, uniform grey that looked less like air and more like someone had swapped in a backdrop. Her stomach did a small, slow drop. She pushed the curtain wider. The world outside went about its business: roofs, power lines, the neighbor's maple tree shaking in a light breeze. The tree's leaves were green, the houses were their usual chipped colors, the street was its usual asphalt. Everything else still remembered itself. Only the sky had gone blank. Sara swung her legs out of bed and padded over to the window. Her reflection hovered over the glass, sleep-tangled hair, oversized t-shirt, eyes still heavy. She dragged the window up a few inches and cold air slid in, smelling like damp pavement and distant exhaust. She tipped her head back. "Hey," she said softly, like she might to a friend who'd gone quiet mid-sentence. "Where'd you go?" The sky, predictably, did not answer. She stood there until her bare feet started to go numb on the wooden floor, then she sighed, shut the window, and reached for her phone. The notifications had already started. Group chat. Lol, what's with the sky? Local feed, screenshots of the same grey expanse. Hashtags blooming with variations of weird sky and filter fail. She scrolled through pictures and felt strangely irritated. Every photo looked wrong in a way the posters didn't seem to see. They zoomed in on the grey, added jokes about Earth forgetting its Instagram filter, turned the anomaly into a meme before they'd had breakfast. Sara's thumbs hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to type, "Do you not remember what it used to look like?" Instead, she wrote, "Kinda creepy, right?" and hit send. 3 dots appeared. Raffi, nah, just pollution. My uncle says it happened in the 80s or something. Sara, remember that time in middle school when we had orange sky from fires? This is karma alawal. Cass, sky's just tired. Let her rest. The little burst of affection she felt at that last one didn't erase the chill in her chest. Because she remembered orange. She remembered smoke. She remembered blue so sharp it made her squint. And somehow, the way everyone else shrugged it off felt like watching people mispronounce a name she loved. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like toast and the faint lemon of recently wiped counters. Her mother stood by the coffee machine, scrolling through headlines on her tablet. The radio babbled quietly with morning news, traffic, local sports. A cheerful voice saying strange but not unprecedented about something Sara guessed was the sky. "Morning," her mother said, not looking up. "You're up early. You sleep at all?" Some, Sara said, and glanced out the kitchen window. Same grey, same unsettling smoothness. "You see outside?" she added. Her mother peered over the rim of her mug. Yeah. Feels like someone left the brightness too low." "You're not freaked out?" Her mother shrugged one shoulder. "It's weather," she said. "Weather's weird. Remember that summer when we had like 7 rainbows in 1 week? This is just the boring version." Sara frowned. "We didn't," she said. Her mother blinked. "Didn't what?" "Have 7 rainbows in a week," Sara said. "I'd remember that. There were like 2. One over the old mall when they closed it, then one near the park months later." Her mother laughed, light, unbothered. "You and your details," she said. "You do remember things wrong sometimes, you know." She turned back to the tablet. On the screen, a news article scrolled past, overlaid with a photo of a grey sky and a caption, "Experts say unusual color shift not a cause for concern." Under that, in smaller print, similar events recorded in 86 and 94. Sara leaned in. "Wait," she said. "No, I would have heard about that. Those were before I was born, but like, it would have been in some documentary or something." "Hun, there are a lot of things that happened before you were born," her mother said, waving the spoon. "You haven't watched every documentary yet." She kissed the top of Sara's head in drive-by affection and moved to rinse her mug. Sara rubbed at a crumb on the table. She had a good memory. It wasn't perfect, but it held on to odd things. Lines from old shows, the layout of houses she'd only visited once, the color of a sweater someone wore 2 winters ago. She could still picture the blue of the sky on the day they buried her father. How wrong it had felt for the world to look so bright when everything inside her had gone heavy. She had never, not once, heard about the sky going blank. But the way her mother talked about it made it sound normal, something people had a word for, like eclipse or drizzle. "Maybe I just missed that lesson," she said under her breath. It didn't feel true. Walking to school felt like moving under the inside of a closed eyelid. No sun, not exactly. There was still light enough to see by, enough to cast soft-edged shadows, but it was diffused, directionless. The kind of light you got in a room with all the lamps on and no windows. On the sidewalk, little clusters of students had their phones held up at arm's length, filming themselves with the grey behind them. "Apocalypse chic," someone said, grinning at their own camera. "Sara!" Sara waved her over from the steps. Raffi and Cass were already there. Cass had her headphones around her neck, music faintly leaking into the air, and Raffi was poking the sky with one finger like he expected it to react. "Feels like being in a video game lobby," he said. "Like we're all waiting for someone to load textures." Sara laughed. Congrats, Raf, you broke the world with your nerd metaphors. Sara stood beside them and looked up. From here, the effect was worse. The school building's sharp lines cut into the sky's uniform grey, making the blankness look even more deliberate. It was like someone had selected the background layer of reality and painted it with a single brushstroke. You okay? Cass asked, nudging her with one elbow. Yeah, Sara lied. It's weird. It's kinda pretty, Sara said, soft, like walking around inside a diffuser. Raffi squinted at the horizon. Bet it's some geoengineering thing they won't tell us about for 10 years. Conspiracy brain says yes, Cass murmured. But also, I kind of like it. It makes everything else stand out more. The trees, the buildings, us. She spread her arms like she was modeling the grey. Sara studied their faces as they talked, trying to see what they weren't seeing. Do you remember what the sky looked like yesterday? She asked. They all blinked. Raffi shrugged. Blue, I guess. What kind of blue? Sara pressed. Like, was it bright? Pale? Was there that line of darker blue near the horizon? He frowned a little. I don't know, it was just sky-colored. Sara tilted her head. You okay? You look like you're going to fight the troposphere. Sara exhaled. Never mind, I just thought you'd remember. Cass looked at her more closely. I remember the clouds, Cass offered slowly. There was one that looked like a dragon. Or a potato. Maybe both. Sara tried to picture it and got nothing but the smooth grey surface overhead. The bell rang. As they filed inside, she glanced back one more time. If she stared hard enough, she could almost imagine seeing hints of color trying to push through from very far away, like something trapped behind frosted glass, a memory pressed against a barrier. She blinked, and it was gone. Third period physics was usually one of Sara's favorite classes. Today, it felt like sitting in a room full of people who'd all taken a test she didn't know they were studying for. Mr. Havel, their physics teacher, had turned the sky into an unofficial lesson topic. He stood at the front of the room with a projector slide showing satellite images of Earth wrapped in grey, speckled with bright city lights. So, he said, you've all seen this by now. The atmosphere is doing strange things. Before anyone asks, no, I don't have a secret back channel to NASA. I know as much as you do. A few chuckles. He tapped the slide. What's interesting, he continued, is that similar phenomena have been recorded before, not just here globally. We call them chromatic occlusion events. The term dropped into the air like a stone into shallow water. Sara's hand shot up before she could stop it. Yes, Sara? Havel asked. When? She said. When were they recorded? Because I feel like I've never heard of that, and I kind of obsessively watch science videos. A few students snickered. Havel smiled kindly. That's a good sign, by the way. Curiosity is healthy, he said. The short answer is, there have been at least 2 confirmed events in the late 20th century. A few others are disputed. He clicked to the next slide. Blurry, grainy photos appeared. People in old clothes standing under blank skies, cars from another decade, cityscapes that looked unnervingly similar to now except for the lack of blue above them. Sara stared. None of this looked familiar. Not the photos. Not the terminology. Not the of course this is a thing tone. But why don't we learn about this? She asked. We did whole units on eclipses, on auroras, on weird lightning. Why not this? We can't teach every anomaly in detail, Havel said, though his brow briefly creased like something about that bothered him too. And until now, most people didn't think chromatic occlusion had major long-term effects. It's just Strange. But there would be documentaries, Sara pressed. Articles, memes from before today. People freaking out about it before now. Conspiracy brain, someone muttered from the back. Havel chuckled. There are plenty of wild things history forgets, he said, or chooses not to emphasize. Ask your parents about events they remember that you've never heard of. You might be surprised. Sara sat back slowly, heart stuttering. Because that was the problem. She had looked. Last night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd gone scrolling through old news archives, documentaries, random rabbit holes about atmospheric phenomena. She remembered the rabbit holes themselves. She remembered the videos, the weird clouds, the auroras, the dust storms. She did not remember this. But apparently, the world did. She stared at the slide until the images blurred. On the page of her notebook she wrote, in small letters, "If the sky can forget its color, what else can forget itself?" Then, underneath that, what if it's not forgetting? What if something is rewriting? She looked up again at the grey light seeping in through the classroom windows. For the first time, it didn't feel like absence. It felt like erasure in progress. After school, Sara didn't go straight home. She cut through the small park behind the main road, the one with the uneven benches, and the duck pond that never actually had ducks. Everything looked crisp under the grey sky. Edges sharp, colours almost too strong against the neutral dome above. Kids played. Dogs chased sticks. Someone jogged past with headphones in. The world was doing its best impression of normal. She sat on her favourite bench, the one under a maple tree that dropped helicopters in spring, and opened her phone. Her fingers flicked through photos with a kind of frantic patience. Vacations, birthdays, random skies she'd shot, because the light was pretty. She'd always taken pictures of the sky, like she'd known, somewhere deep down, that she might need proof of what it had been. But the picture she was looking for wasn't there. She knew it existed. She remembered the day as sharply as a scratch. Her father lifting her onto his shoulders, the wobble of his balance, the camera in her mother's hand, the ocean wind in her hair, the horizon slicing the world in half with a bright blue line. She could see the photo in her mind. The way her father's head was tilted slightly, mid-laugh, the exact shade of the sky behind him. It wasn't on her phone. It wasn't in any of the folders. It wasn't in the cloud. She checked the backed-up archive out of habit. Nothing. The bench felt suddenly too hard beneath her. Maybe it's in a box somewhere, she told herself. Printed, not digital. We weren't always carrying cameras. It could be true. It didn't feel true. She closed the Photos app and opened her messages instead. Her thumb hovered over her mum's name, then slid to another contact. Aunt Mira. If anyone had hoarded physical copies of old family pictures, it was her aunt. Sara typed. Hey, random question. Do you still have those beach photos from when I was like 7? The ones where Dad put me on his shoulders? The typing bubbles blinked on almost immediately. Of course I do. Why, are you feeling nostalgic with the weird sky? Her chest loosened a fraction. Can you send me one? A pause. Longer this time. Then. That's strange. I'm looking at the album now. I have the beach day but not that one. Just you with your floaty, and your dad sitting on the blanket. I swear there used to be one with you on his shoulders. I remember the angle. Maybe your mum has it. The world tilted slightly. Sara stared at the text. Someone else remembered. The same scene. The same missing photo. Her pulse thudded in her throat. You remember it too? Yes. Him laughing, right? You're holding on to his head. Your mum said she almost dropped the camera because she was laughing too. Sara swallowed. The sky overhead was still smooth, still quiet, still blank. I can't find it anywhere either. Your mum might have thrown it out. She got strange about photos for a while after. The sentence trailed off without finishing. Sara filled in the blank herself. After he died. She typed, fingers stiff. Mum doesn't throw photos out. Not ones with him in them. This time, the typing dots blinked for a long time, then vanished with no reply. Sara put the phone face down on the bench. A wind slipped through the park, lifting stray leaves and touching the back of her neck. She looked up at the dome of grey. It felt less like a sky now, and more like the underside of a lid. In the afternoon, the library was quiet enough to hear the clock arguing with itself. Sara sat at a back table surrounded by shelves that smelled like paper and dust, and the ghost of old glue. The librarian had smiled at her in that pleased, slightly relieved way adults did when a teenager voluntarily entered a building without a cash register. What are you looking for? She'd asked. Old science books, Sara had said. On weather. Atmosphere. Anything before like 20 years ago. The librarian's eyebrows had gone up, but she led her to a row of shelves anyway. Now Sara dragged a heavy hardcover textbook toward herself. Its cover was faded, its pages yellowed at the edges, but the diagrams inside were still crisp, cross-sections of clouds, bands of color wrapping around globes, the familiar arc of the visible spectrum. She flipped to the chapter on the sky. There it was, Rayleigh scattering. Why the sky is blue. Why sunsets are red. Common atmospheric phenomena. She ran her finger under the heading. Why the sky is blue. Not why the sky sometimes forgets to be. No mention of chromatic occlusion. No grey dome events. No rare but documented anomalies. She checked the index just to be sure. Nothing. Next she pulled a more recent edition from a different shelf. Its cover was more polished, its photos sharper. When she searched the index there, she found a new term slotted between cloud classification and haze. Chromatic occlusion events, page 214. She flipped there quickly. A neat little sidebar waited halfway down the page. A blue-grey box with 3 old photographs in small rectangles at the top. Blank skies above cityscapes. People looking up. Everything muted. The text below was brief, almost lazily so. Chromatic occlusion events are rare occurrences in which atmospheric conditions cause a temporary loss of apparent color in the sky, typically resulting in a uniform gray or white canopy. These events are not yet fully understood, but are considered short-lived and generally harmless. Historical records suggest events in a list of years. No significant long-term impacts on human health or climate have been observed. That was it. No reference studies. No theories. No acknowledgement of emotional or perceptual repercussions. It was the scientific equivalent of a shrug. She looked back at the older edition and felt something twist in her stomach. 2 versions of reality. One where this had never been important enough to mention. One where it had. Except if it had always been a known thing, why wasn't it in the old book? She checked the publication date. Plenty of time to include at least one earlier event, if it had actually happened then. Unless the events had changed, not just the sky. The records about the sky. She stared at the page until the text started to blur. In the quiet she heard the librarian typing softly at the front desk. A chair scraped somewhere. Someone coughed. Ordinary sounds. Anchors. She closed the newer textbook and sat back. Okay, she whispered to herself. Either I am going quietly insane, or the world is editing itself and not everyone got the patch notes. Neither option felt comforting. She checked out the older textbook anyway, and tucked it under her arm as she left. Proof. Or at least, a before. If the library ever updated it, she wanted to know what was different. She had almost made it back to her street when she noticed the boy on the bridge. He was leaning over the railing of the small overpass that crossed the dry creek bed, staring up at the sky with an expression Sara recognized. Not awe, not boredom, but a kind of quiet fury at something you couldn't touch. She had seen him at school before, a grade above her maybe. Heavy headphones usually around his neck, sketchbook visible more often than not. Today, there was no sketchbook. Just his hands curled over the railing, knuckles pale. She slowed without meaning to. He glanced sideways and caught her mid-stare. Hey, he said, like they were picking up an old conversation instead of starting a new one. Does it look thinner to you? She blinked. What? The sky, he said, gesturing with his chin. Like if I threw something at it hard enough it would punch through. Like bad wallpaper. She laughed despite herself. Nobody else talks about it like that, she said. Yeah, well, he replied. Nobody else seems to remember what it used to look like either. Her heart jolted. Sara shifted closer on the bridge. You remember, she said carefully. Blue? He snorted. That a test? Yeah, I remember blue. I remember that gross washed-out blue after it rained, and that insane electric blue we got the night before the blackout last year, and the weird greenish tint during that storm everyone filmed and… He stopped himself, shook his head. Sorry, he muttered. I start listing things when I'm nervous. She smiled. Me too, she said, but with details instead of everything. He squinted at her properly then, like he was recalibrating something. You're in my physics class, right? He asked. Sara? She nodded, surprised he knew her name. Jonah, he said, just in case this is the part where we become co-conspirators against the sky or something. Something in her unclenched with a soft click. Have you heard of chromatic occlusion events before today? She asked. He rolled his eyes so hard she thought they might fall out. Apparently we all have, he said. Didn't you hear? It's very normal. My dad swears he watched the last one on TV in the 90s. Says there were documentaries. I asked him to name one. He changed the subject. My mom claims we had 7 rainbows in a week when we didn't, Sara said. So that tracks. Jonah's mouth twisted in a grim smile. It's like everyone got the same script handed to them, he said. And we didn't. Why us? She asked. Obviously we're chosen by the cosmos to suffer, he said dryly. Or we have better RAM. She huffed a laugh. The creek bed below them was mostly rocks and scrub. The town loomed in miniature along the road in both directions. Overhead the grey dome hung, vast and silent. Do you feel like something's missing? Sara asked quietly. Not just the blue, like something bigger got smudged. He leaned his chin on his hand, considering. I feel like I used to know the rules, he said, and now someone changed a few without telling me which ones. Like when they update a game and suddenly your favorite move doesn't work the same way anymore. You talk in video games, she said. Yep, I talk in weather metaphors, she replied. Good, he said. We're bilingual. They stood there for a long moment, not speaking, both looking up. Sara felt less alone. which paradoxically made her more afraid. Because if there were two of them, there might be more. And whatever was happening to the sky wasn't just a personal glitch. That night, Sara sat on her bed with the old science textbook open, phone beside her, current sky glowing grey through the window. She flipped to the index again. Rayleigh scattering, card 74. Color perception, 211. Chromatic occlusion events. Her finger froze. The line was gone. Her eyes scanned down the page. Nothing between color perception and cloud types. She flipped to the chapter where the sidebar had been. A full-page photo of a blue sky over mountains smiled innocently back at her. No grey dome, no little blue-grey box, no mention. Her heart thudded in her ears. She was sure. She had read it. She had traced the words with her finger. Now it wasn't there. Slowly, like her hands didn't entirely belong to her, she picked up the book and checked the publication date again. Same as before. She stared at the blank space in the chapter, her breath going shallow. On impulse, she grabbed a pen and wrote in the margin, in small letters. There was a paragraph here about chromatic occlusion events. She underlined it. If it vanished too, she thought, she would probably scream. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jonah. Look up. She did. Out the window, the sky was the same grey, lit faintly from nowhere. But there, directly above her street, was a single small patch a few shades lighter, like a smudge where someone's eraser had hesitated. Color, maybe. Memory trying to push through, maybe. Her phone buzzed again. You see that, over the east side? Like something's trying to remember itself. She stared until her eyes stung. For a brief, wild second, she could almost imagine she saw blue there. Then the patch smoothed itself back into uniform grey. Her brain offered her a thought she didn't want. What if the sky isn't blank because it forgot? What if it's blank because it's in the middle of rewriting something, and they're just watching the in-between? The next day, the sky was still grey. The news had gotten more confident. The sky that went neutral, one headline declared. Experts reassure. No cause for panic. They put a psychologist on one show, a woman with calm eyes and careful hair, who explained something called collective misremembering. Sometimes when something strange happens, she said, people convince themselves they've seen it before. Their brains dislike novelty without context, so they create history. That's likely what we're seeing with these so-called memory anomalies online. Sara watched the segment on her phone at lunch, sitting on the edge of the school courtyard with her sandwich untouched. It felt like listening to someone patiently explain why the thing you were holding in your hands didn't exist. She wanted to throw the phone into the nearest trash can. Fun stuff, huh? Jonah said, dropping down beside her. How are you so casual? She asked. I'm not, he said. I'm just better at faking it. He held up his own phone. Check this, he said. On the screen was a forum thread. People from all over posting grainy photos of grey skies, telling stories. Most of them were variations of the same theme. Parents insisting this had happened before. Kids saying they'd never heard of it. What if they're right? Sara asked. What if we just forgot? Then why do I remember other things from those years? Jonah said. But not this. I can tell you what cartoon I was obsessed with at 6, but not the time the sky turned into a screensaver. No way. He shrugged. Besides, he added, there's this. He swiped to another post. The picture there made Sara's scalp tingle. It was an old photograph of a city skyline under a blank grey sky. The cars, the clothing, the architecture, all screamed decades ago. On the back of the photo, someone had written in pen, "The day the world went colourless, 1972, lasted a week." Below that, in a different colour of ink, someone else had added, "No one else remembers this. Not even Mom. Why?" The timestamp on the upload was from years ago, long before this current event. People have been noticing for a while, Jonah said. They just got buried under everything else. Or overwritten, Sara murmured. A gust of wind pushed at the edges of the courtyard. The grey above seemed to deepen for a moment, like the sky was listening. That afternoon, Havel was more distracted than usual. He fiddled with his pen, dropped his chalk twice, and stared out the window between explanations. "Okay," he said abruptly, partway through an equation. "Everyone put your notebooks down. I want to try something." The class groaned in the automatic chorus of people allergic to surprises. He ignored it. "Close your eyes," he said. Someone muttered, "If this is a trust exercise," under their breath. "Not that kind," Havel said, with a flicker of a smile. "Humor me, close them." Sara did. "You remember the sky," he said, "from before. Picture it." The room shifted, chairs creaking, faint coughs. A pen dropped, but mostly quiet. "Okay," Havel continued. "Now, raise your hand if you can see it clearly. Color, texture, details. Don't overthink it. Just, if you feel like you can." Sara's hand went up slowly. Another rustle. One more hand, somewhere to her right. "Now," he said, "keep your eyes closed. If your hand is up, tell me one specific sky memory. Not it was blue, something real, something anchored." Sara swallowed. "I remember the sky the day of the meteor shower," she said. "The one last spring. There was this dark blue band near the horizon, then this almost purple above it. And the way the streaks cut through, it made everything feel higher, taller." A pause. "Good," Havel said quietly. "Anyone else?" Silence stretched. Then Jonah's voice spoke up from the other side of the room. "I remember the sky the night before that big storm," he said. "The clouds had this green tint. My mom said it meant hail. It looked wrong, like someone had messed with the saturation." "Okay," Havel murmured. Hands down, eyes open. The room blinked back into being. Sara glanced around. Most of her classmates looked more confused than moved. A few snickered. One girl was clearly just annoyed about the interruption. Havel leaned against his desk. "Now," he said, "hands up if you feel like you just made something up because I asked you to." About half the class raised their hands. He nodded, unsurprised. "That's what the psychologist on the news is talking about," he said. "Memory under pressure, suggestibility. But, Sara, Jonah." He pointed at them. "You two looked like you were remembering something real," he said. "Like recalled sensation, not reconstructed image." Heat crept up Sara's neck. "Maybe we're just better at lying," she said. He smiled faintly. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe not." He tapped the desk once, lightly. "The thing is," he added, voice softer, "I have a sky memory like that too. A very specific one. I can smell the air when I think about it." From the last chromatic event? Someone asked, half teasing. His mouth opened, then closed. I don't know, he said slowly. That's the weird part. I remember the blue, vividly. I don't remember anything like this. He gestured at the window, where the grey loomed, flat and impenetrable. For a moment, his expression cracked into something like unease. Then he straightened and picked up the chalk. Anyway, he said briskly, back to electromagnetism. The universe is mostly indifferent to our feelings, fortunately for my lesson plan. Laughter bubbled up around the room, but Sara caught Jonah's eye. They both had the same thought. If even the science teacher's memories weren't lining up with the new script, something was fraying at the edges. That evening, the first real crack appeared. Sara was on her roof. She wasn't supposed to be on the roof. Her mother had a whole set of elaborate worries involving broken limbs and lawsuits and teenagers falling into neighbors' yards. But the roof was the only place where the sky felt big enough to think under it properly. She had climbed out through her bedroom window with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it many times before, and stretched out on the shingles, old science book beside her, phone in her hand. The town glowed softly below, streetlights in lines, car headlights drifting, the ordinary constellation of human activity. Above, the grey was darker now, but still uniform. No stars, no moon, just gradient. Her phone buzzed. Jonah looked west. She did. At first, she didn't see it. Then, a line. Faint and hair-thin, running across a slice of the sky from one invisible point to another. Not a contrail, those curved, faded. This stayed straight and sharp, like a scratch on glass. Inside that line, for a heartbeat, there was color. Not full blue, more like the memory of it. A hint, a whisper. Her breath caught. The line widened, just enough to show a deeper shade. Sara squinted, heart pounding in her ears. Electric blue. She knew that color. It was the exact shade of the sky from the meteor shower night. The air pressure around her felt wrong for a second. Too light, too thin. Then, the line closed. The grey smoothed over. The world exhaled. Her phone buzzed again. Jonah, you saw that right. Not just me. Sara, yes. It was the meteor shower sky. Jonah, storm night blue for me. Maybe it's pulling from different memories. Sara, or it's trying them on. She stared up, waiting for another glitch. None came. But now that she'd seen it, she couldn't unsee the sense that something massive was shifting just beyond the visible layer, like the sky was a progress bar, and reality was halfway through an update. She lay back on the shingles and pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes until bursts of color danced behind her lids. At least I remember you, she whispered to the missing blue. When she dropped her hands, the grey looked flatter than ever. The cracks kept coming. Not often, not predictably, but enough that after a few days Sara and Jonah had a rough sense of when to watch. Late evening, just as the town lights came on and the air cooled. The first time it happened again, Sara was in the park. A thin line appeared across the sky above the swing set, widened just enough to show a wash of deep violet, then closed. A toddler on the swings clapped and shouted, "Purple, ah!" before their parents shushed them gently and said, "Just clouds, sweetie." The parents' eyes, Sara noticed, never left their phone. She texted Jonah. Another crack. Purple this time. Like sunset before the storm. Purple. I got orange near the industrial park, like that time we had fire smoke. Think it's replaying sky moods? She sat on the grass and watched the grey hold itself together. Her mind gnawed on a thought. If the cracks showed different colors to different people, if Jonah saw storm night blue while she saw meteor shower blue, maybe the sky wasn't pulling from a single archive. Maybe it was sampling individual memories. You're starting to look like you're trying to solve climate change with your eyebrows, Jonah said, 2 days later, when they met on the bridge again. He had a notebook now, not for homework, for the sky. He flipped it open. Pages of dates, times, locations, places where the grey had broken, however briefly. Little coloured pencil marks beside them. Blue, purple, green, orange. He held the pencil between his fingers. Look, he said. Whenever I see a crack, it matches some sky from my past. My mom remembers that night as kinda dull. I remember it as the most electric sky I've ever seen. The crack showed my version, not hers. I think it's personal, Sara said quietly. Like, the sky is checking, testing, trying on our memories like clothes. He made a face. Creepy metaphor. Sorry, she said. I talk in weather. He smiled faintly. Don't stop, he said. It's actually kind of useful. He pointed the pencil up at the dome. What if it's not just forgetting, he said. What if it's compressing, like when you run out of storage and your computer shoves all your photos into lower resolution? But why the sky, she asked. Why that layer of everything? Because it's the biggest thing we all see, he said. The most shared canvas. He tapped his notebook. If you wanted to change the story everyone told themselves about the world, he said quietly, you'd start with the part above their heads. The first real clue didn't come from the sky. It came from a humming machine in the school basement. Sara had never had a reason to go down there before. It was where the server room lived, along with old equipment and the kind of smell buildings get when they've been absorbing damp for decades. Jonah had convinced the IT teacher he wanted to help with inventory for extra credit. If we're going to snoop, might as well be supervised, he'd said. Less suspicious that way. Now they stood in a narrow hallway lined with metal shelves, listening to the low, steady whir of fans. At the end of the hall, behind a glass panel, was the server room, racks of blinking lights and cables. On a small desk just outside, a monitor glowed with data, network status, storage logs, system time. Sara wasn't sure what she was expecting, not this. On the screen, a graph showed network traffic over the last week, spikes, dips, the usual. But underneath, another window pulsed gently. Global Atmos data cache AX, update in progress. Percent complete, 62%. Sara frowned. What's that? Probably some synced external feed, Jonah said. Weather services, atmospheric readings. The school uses them for, I don't know, science class slides? He moved the mouse. A progress detail expanded. Pulling archival sky maps. Pushing new skyset parameters. Merging perceptual normalization index. Sara's skin prickled. What does that mean? She whispered. Jonah's brow furrowed. Looks like some system is downloading data about the sky, he said, and uploading new instructions. He clicked one more time. A log file opened. It was dense and unreadable at first glance. Numbers, timestamps, compressed code. But sprinkled between lines were plain language tags. Occlusion wave 01-8. Historical color profiles merged. Outlier perception nodes flagged. She pointed. What's that? she asked. Outlier perception? He swallowed. Us, he said. People who aren't falling in line with the new default. He skimmed more lines. Global normalization target. Reduce variance in sky-associated memory by 87%. Her heart did a slow, cold turn. So, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Some system is smoothing people's memories of the sky. He nodded. Looks like it, he said. Probably not intentionally malicious. Could be some big data project gone weird. Or an AI climate model updating visual expectations. Or something else entirely, she finished. She stepped back from the monitor. The grey outside the tiny basement window felt heavier. Jonah, she said. If it's normalizing memory, what happens to people who don't normalize? He didn't answer. Over the next few days, the towns started to use new language. People stopped calling it weird. They started saying things like, this phase, and the grey cycle, and, like in those old photos. Someone printed novelty t-shirts with a blank sky, and the words, I lived through the grey, and sold them downtown. Children drew pictures with grey crayons at the top, and didn't seem bothered. In class, when Havel mentioned Rayleigh scattering again, a student raised her hand and asked if it was even relevant anymore. The sky isn't blue now, she said. Shouldn't we be learning about whatever this is instead? Havel gave an answer about foundational knowledge and the likelihood of the blue returning. But his eyes slid briefly to Sara and Jonah. At home, Sara's mother started calling the grey soothing. It makes everything look less harsh, she said one evening, stirring sauce on the stove. Your father would have liked it. He always said bright sky gave him headaches. Sara almost dropped the plate she was drying. No, he didn't, she said. He loved bright days. He'd drag us outside whenever it was clear. Remember? He'd say, wasting a blue day is a crime. Her mother frowned. He might have said that once, she allowed. But I don't think he felt that strongly. He did, Sara insisted. But the rest of the sentence crumbled in her mouth. Because suddenly, she could see a version of him sitting inside on a bright day, curtains half drawn, rubbing his temples. Had that happened? Had she just never noticed? Or was this how it began? Little adjustments, small edits, alternative scenes layered over the originals. She set the plate down carefully. I need air, she said, and stepped out back. The sky was the same uniform grey. She tried to picture her father under it. Couldn't. The memory wouldn't land. Her phone buzzed. Jonah, meet me. Sara, where? Jonah, same bridge and bring your oldest sky memory. She stared at the message. Her oldest sky memory. The one she was already losing. The creek bed was as dry as it had ever been. Jonah sat on the railing, sneakers hooked under the metal bar, notebook open on his lap. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I tested something, he said as soon as she was close. Hi to you too, she said, but her voice was gentle. He tapped the notebook. I tried to write down every sky I could remember, he said. Specific days, colors, shapes. Then I checked back later. He flipped the pages toward her. Some were filled, some half-filled. But here and there were gaps, empty spaces where sentences had been started and never finished, lines that cut off mid-word. Beneath them, in smaller handwriting, he'd added, I know there was something here. It's like trying to grab mist, he said. The more I focus, the faster it evaporates. He took a breath. So I did something else, he said. I drew them. He turned to the back. Crude sketches of skies, a jagged horizon with aurora bands, a city street under low yellow clouds, a beach with a hard, bright line of blue, a night sky with streaks like scratches of light. These stay, he said, even when the words go fuzzy. I don't know if it's because visual memory fights back harder, or because the system doesn't know how to erase drawings. You're talking like it's a person, she said softly. I'm talking like it's a process, he replied. Processes have weak points. Maybe this one doesn't know what to do with things we create in response to it. She looked at his drawings. I don't want to forget him, she said suddenly. Jonah blinked. Who? He asked, though he probably knew. My dad, she said. Not just his face, not just the fact that he existed. I don't want to forget the way the sky looked on the days that mattered with him. He closed the notebook. Then don't, he said. She might have laughed if she weren't so close to crying. It's not that simple, she said. He hesitated. Maybe it is in one way, he said. Maybe the system's trying to lighten the load. Humans attach a lot to the sky, you know. Hope, dread, omens. Maybe someone decided all that noise was too much. Smooth the sky, smooth the collective mood. That's horrifying, she said. It's also almost kind, he said, in a messed up, overreaching way. Take away the extremes so people don't have to hold so much. And what about us? She asked. The ones who remember the extremes. He looked up. We get to choose, he said quietly. We can let it wash over us. Or we can be anchors. She stared at him. That's not fair, she said. I didn't say it was, he replied. They stood together in silence. The grey above them felt heavy but not entirely indifferent. Sara pictured the missing beach photo. The tilt of the horizon. Her father's laugh. The slice of impossible blue. She realized with a small, sharp grief that she could no longer see the details as clearly. The edges were smudging. But if she closed her eyes, she could still feel the way that day had sat inside her. Bright, and afraid, and huge. Maybe that's what the sky was after. Not the images. The weight. She opened her eyes. Okay, she said. Then we anchor. That night, Sara didn't go to the roof. She went to the widest place she could get to on foot. The field just beyond the last row of houses, where the land opened up for a few acres before giving way to trees. Jonah met her there, notebook under his arm, a small flashlight clipped to his jacket. The sky above was a vast, unbroken canvas of grey. It feels bigger out here, she said. Or we feel smaller, he replied. He flipped to a blank page in the notebook. So, he said, if this is some kind of update, maybe we can feed it data it doesn't know what to flatten. You want to talk to it? She asked. Everything responds to something, he said. Even if the answer is silence. They lay on their backs in the damp grass, shoulders almost touching, and stared up. Okay, Jonah said quietly. Tell it a story about the sky. Sara swallowed. Her throat felt tight. The day my father died, she said slowly, the sky was blue. She spoke as if narrating to herself. To Jonah, to anything listening. Too blue, she said. It felt rude, like the world should have gone grey to match us, but it didn't. I remember thinking, how can it look like this when everything is wrong? Jonah didn't interrupt. The blue made it worse, she said, and better, both, because I could look up and think, okay, something still works, even if we don't. Her voice shook. I don't want you to take that away, she whispered, addressing the blank above. I don't care if it hurts. I don't want a sky that never clashes with how I feel. I want the real one, even if it's too much. Her words faded into the field. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Jonah spoke. The first time I realized I was really small, he said, was during that meteor shower last year. The sky was this ridiculous electric blue before it went dark. I remember thinking, I'm not the main character in anything. I'm just on the same screen as everything else, and it was terrifying and weirdly freeing. He took a shaky breath. I don't want that erased either, he said. I don't want a sky that never overwhelms me. I need to be overwhelmed sometimes. They fell quiet. The grey above remained still. Then, a line. Not thin this time, not a crack. A widening band, stretching from one side of their vision to the other, like someone had taken a knife to the surface and peeled back a strip. Behind it, for a few seconds, was unmistakable blue. Not any one of their memories. Something new, soft, deep, real. The air pressed down, then lifted, like a held breath finally let go. Sara's eyes stung. Hi, she whispered. The blue flickered, shifted. Inside it, briefly, she thought she saw flashes of other skies, storm green, sunset gold, purple, black with stars, stacked like layers in glass. The band thinned. Closed. Grey again. But the grey looked different now. Less like a wall, more like a veil. She realized her heart was pounding, not with dread but with something like recognition. It heard us, she said. Or we heard it, Jonah replied. The next morning, the town woke to something halfway between the old world and the new. The sky was not fully blue, it was muted. A pale wash with hints of grey still clinging at the edges, like someone had started to repaint and run out of courage halfway through. Most people were thrilled. See, the morning show host said. Told you it was temporary. Weather apps changed their icons back from neutral blocks to sun and cloud. Kids at school pointed up between classes and said, it's almost normal again. But for Sara and Jonah, the change came with a quiet ache. Because they noticed the ways it wasn't the same. Shades they used to be able to name now escaped them. The sharpness of certain memories dulled. When they tried to recall specific skies, sometimes they saw them clearly. Other times they saw only the new, washed-out version. I feel like half my sky memories are on another drive, Jonah said at lunch, pushing his food around his tray. Like I can't access them unless I go somewhere I don't know how to go. Sara nodded. But we haven't lost all of it, she said. We remember enough to know something happened. That counts. He studied her face. You don't sound relieved, he said. I am, she said. Kind of. It's just, now we live in between. We're not fully in the old world or the new one. He shrugged. Maybe that's where most people actually live, he said. We just noticed. She thought of her mother talking about soothing grey, of Havel's unsure expression, of the forum posts from people insisting they'd seen this before, even when they had no proof. Not everyone had fought the edit. Not everyone had wanted to. Maybe that was okay. Not everyone needed to be an anchor. Over the following weeks, the adjustment continued. The sky settled into a new normal. Paler, softer, less dramatic. The sunsets still burned sometimes, but not with the same wild intensity. The storms still came, But the green tint nights Jonah remembered never quite repeated themselves. The world accepted it. "We're getting older," someone joked online. "Even the sky is mellowing out." Sara and Jonah kept their notebooks. They drew skies from memory as best they could. They labeled them with dates, places, emotions. When the details slipped, they wrote that down too. "I know this used to be sharper. I remember more stars than I can draw. There was a blue I can't name anymore." It didn't stop the forgetting entirely, but it made room for something else. A sense of responsibility, quiet and stubborn. One afternoon, as they sat on the bridge watching the almost blue overhead, Jonah said, "Maybe this is the job now. Just to remember that the sky has been other ways, so that if it ever forgets again, someone can say, 'No, this isn't all you are.'" Sara watched a small plane cross the washed-out expanse, leaving a thin white line that faded quickly. "Do you think it's alive?" she asked. "The system," he said. "The sky," she said. "The thing behind it. The memory of it. Whatever we talked to in the field." He considered. "I think if enough of us treat something like it's listening," he said, "then, in a way, it is. Even if it's just the part of ourselves that lives in it." She nodded slowly. That felt right. They fell into easy silence. Overhead, the pale sky softened further as the day moved toward evening. For a moment, as the sun dipped, there was a flash of color, a deeper blue, a streak of pink. Sara didn't grab for her phone. She just looked. And tried, very deliberately, to remember. 1 year later, the anniversary came and went without anyone naming it. There were no commemorative broadcasts. No "this time last year" montages. The world had decided, collectively, to absorb it into the background hum of reality. But Sara noticed. She stood once again in the field beyond the houses, now a little taller, her hair a little longer, the old science textbook replaced by a worn sketchbook in her bag. The sky above was still the newer version, soft, quiet, slightly desaturated, but tonight, it held a good scattering of stars. Jonah lay in the grass beside her, their shoulders almost touching, as they had on that first night. "Do you remember the exact shade?" she asked. "Of what?" he said. "The blue," she said, "before all this." He thought for a moment. "Yes," he said. Then after a beat, "No, not like I used to." She nodded. "Same," she said. "But I remember this," he added. He gestured upward. "This almost blue," he said. "This slightly off sky. This feeling. You. The field. The fact that we're even asking the question. This is a new sky memory." She smiled, a little sadly. "I don't want to spend my whole life comparing it to what used to be," she said. "Then don't," he replied gently. "Let this be what it is. Half remembered, partial, ours anyway." She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she let herself see the sky the way it wanted to be seen now. Not as a failure to be what it had been, but as a different version, trying its best to hold everything. "Hey," she whispered, barely audible. Her voice carried upward. "Thank you for coming back at all," she said. A thin breeze moved through the grass. Somewhere far above, a faint band of deeper blue flickered. Not a crack, not an error. An acknowledgement. A new memory, made and kept. Years later, someone would ask Sara what she remembered about the day the sky went grey. She would pause, choose her words carefully, and say, "I remember feeling like the world had been put on mute." like someone had taken the most obvious thing we all agree on and quietly edited it while we were asleep. When they laughed, gently, and said they didn't remember it being that dramatic, she would smile and let it go. She knew better than to argue with someone else's patch. In her own quiet, she'd keep sketching skies in the margins of notebooks. Blues, she almost remembered, greens that might have been, oranges that felt like they belonged to a different timeline. Sometimes, when a child pointed up and said, "Why is the sky like that?" and a parent answered with an easy, confident story, she would watch closely. If the story matched the new script, she would nod and move on. If it didn't, if it cracked a little around the edges, if the parent hesitated and said, "It wasn't always," she'd feel a small warmth in her chest. Because she wasn't the only anchor. She never had been. On certain evenings, when the not quite blue turned richer for a few minutes, she'd go out to the field, or the bridge, or simply stand on her back steps and look up. Not demanding, not pleading, just acknowledging. She didn't know if the sky was alive, or if the process that had smoothed it had been algorithmic, cosmic, or something stranger. But she knew this. There was a time when the sky forgot its color. Some people forgot with it. Some didn't. And somewhere in that gap between what was and what is, a small quiet truth lived. Remembering is its own kind of weather. And she'd learned how to stand in it. Thank you for spending this grey sky evening with me. If this story tugged at something you almost remember, let me know in the comments. I love hearing the pieces you hang on to. If you want more quiet, strange little worlds like this, make sure you like, subscribe, and come back for the next one. Until then, look up once in a while. Even if the sky forgets itself, you don't have to.